Hi, everyone. Don't be shy. You can move to the front of the room. I can always tell who the best students are. They're the ones that sit in the front row. So, okay. Now I see some people wanting to sit in the front row. Good. Okay. So, everyone, my name is Shamaila Chaudhry. I work here at Johns Hopkins SAIS. I'm senior advisor to Dean Vali Nasser, and I'm also a fellow at the Foreign Policy Institute, where I run an initiative called The Big Picture. It is a forum that explores international affairs through arts and culture. It is the reason we are lucky and blessed to have all this beautiful art around us on a regular basis. We have built relationships with the creative community that focuses on issues that we care about here at SAIS. So race, class, gender, both in the United States, overseas, anything international affairs oriented, we like to feature as part of this initiative. So if you are interested, if you yourself are someone that does art and is in policy, be in touch with us or put us in touch with folks that you know. This event started with a conversation with Michelle Khazarian. She's one of our students who will be coming up here shortly to introduce the speakers. She thought that it would be a great idea to have an event on Turkey and artistic expression, given the political dynamics in the country and given the focus of our initiative. So I want to give her credit for taking the lead on this. This is a great example of what SAIS students can do with an interdisciplinary kind of approach to policy. So I want to credit her with that, and I will turn it over to her now.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Under Pressure, Constraints on Artistic Expression in New Turkey. This event is hosted by the Foreign Policy Institute and the Big Picture Initiative. As Shamaila stated, my name is Michelle. I'm an MA candidate here at Johns Hopkins SAIS, and Big Picture initiatives are guided by the idea that better policy results from engaging in interdisciplinary conversations across sectors, and we are committed to collaboration, dialogue, and exploration. Because at SAIS, we train students to improve the global human condition, and this series is an extension of that. I'm honored to welcome up to the front today Dr. Lisel Hintz and Sermin Ciddi. Dr. Hintz is Assistant Professor of International Relations and European Studies at Johns Hopkins SAIS. She received her PhD in Political Science from George Washington University and was a postdoctoral fellow at Cornell University and a visiting assistant professor at Barnard College at Columbia University. Her first book, Identity Politics Inside Out, National Identity Contestation and Foreign Policy in Turkey, investigates how contestation over various forms of identity spills over from domestic politics to shape and be shaped by foreign policy. Her current book project examines state-society struggles over identity in Turkey through the lens of pop culture. Sermin Ciddi is a renowned Turkish artist skilled in modern miniature painting, one of the highly specialized visual arts of Turkish and Ottoman culture. Born in Istanbul, Ms. Ciddi takes inspiration from her native city's vistas and rich history to create her paintings. Ms. Ciddi studied and worked with Turkey's premier artists at the Istanbul State Fine Arts Academy and elsewhere before joining their ranks with her first exhibition of her work in 1996. Her art has been displayed in numerous galleries and cultural centers across Turkey, including as part of the Today's Masters series at the 2010 Istanbul European Cultural Capital celebrations. In April 2017, Ms. Ciddi was selected to be a permanent member of the Torpedo Factory Artist Association in Alexandria, Virginia. So, Dr. Hintz, if you'd like to come up, please.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to ask everybody for another round of applause, please, because Michelle Khazarian has been outstanding in organizing this, so thank you very much. She was also one of my students. Thank you to Shamaila. Thank you to Danny, who was signing you in. Thank you guys all for coming. This is fantastic. There is more room in the front if people want to scooch in. Never be afraid. Or if you want to stay near the food, that's fine as well. I always say at every presentation that I give on Turkey, and I've done a lot of them, that it is a very timely day to be talking about Turkish politics. And my goodness, is it ever a timely day. So we had the local elections yesterday, March 31st. This is the end, kind of one hopes perhaps the climax of a series of election after election after election after protest after coup attempt after election. And so perhaps things will calm down a little bit. But I think a lot of Turkey watchers like I am were watching the news quite late last night, interested in what's going on. The answer is we still don't necessarily know. We saw a huge surprise with the opposition doing a lot better than a lot of us predicted. Not that people weren't upset with the current ruling Justice and Development Party, or AKP, but rather that, as in past elections, there have been irregularities that led us to suspect that perhaps they were going to hold on to major cities. It looks as though the opposition has taken Ankara, and we will see if that remains. It looks as though they are prevailing in Istanbul. I don't know if that will remain or not. It will be fascinating to watch what happens. I don't want to make any predictions. So it's a very timely day to be talking about Turkey, and I personally am thrilled to be able, to talk about the intersection of art and politics, which has been on my mind since I first visited Istanbul in 2010. It is the subject, as Michelle said, of my second book, the intersection of sort of pop culture and politics. How does the regime use pop culture as a tool of social engineering? How do opposition actors use it as a platform of subversion, making fun of the regime, using hidden messages, all that kind of stuff. So I thought what a great way, and when Michelle suggested this to me, I just thought it was an excellent opportunity to talk about artistic expression in Turkey, and then also to be able to bring in a dear friend of mine, an extremely talented artist, Sermin Ciddi, who will be joining me in a little bit. But I wanted to set the stage and give you guys a few vignettes into why I think it's important to look at the intersection of art and politics, and what are these constraints on artistic expression. So I'm a big, probably because I look at art and politics, I'm a big fan of imagery. So you're going to see not a lot of words, don't worry, just a lot of pictures. Does anyone know who this artist is here? Any guesses? Preferably from non-Turks. Let's see if any non-Turk knows this. Nobody? Not even my politics and pop culture student? It's okay, we're talking about her this week, so they get a pass. We'll talk about her on Wednesday. This is Zehra Doğan. Zehra Doğan is a Kurdish artist who was jailed in 2016, I believe it was. She was in jail for 2 years, and she was in jail because she was considered to be contributing to terrorist propaganda. This is a picture that was taken of her. It's become a rather iconic picture. I'd like you to notice the details of the picture, that on the right-hand side is not just a jail bar, but a pencil. So there's going to be a lot of symbolism in the images that I'm showing. And the reason that I wanted to start with this picture is that it's actually a very small portion of a much larger artistic exhibit done by, I see some nodding, yes? Banksy, okay? The famous British street artist. This is on a facade in New York, and this has sort of been a forum for artistic expression for the last 10 years or so. But Banksy, overnight installations, kind of guerrilla street art, as it were. And you have the sort of ticks of the number of days that Zehra Doğan had been in jail by that point. And then in the right-hand corner, it says, "Free Zehra Doğan." And this, is really a great way of bringing a lot of public attention. When I showed the photo, some of you remembered the story of who she is. And very much a pushback, an international pushback against the fact that she's in jail. And so now you're going to ask, well, what was she technically in jail for? She was released just about a month ago, the end of February. So what was she in jail for? Zehra Doğan was in jail for, on the internet, sharing a painting of hers, which was showing sort of a desecrated city of Nusaybin, which is in the province of Mardin in southeast, predominantly Kurdish-dominated Turkey. So she did a painting of sort of the city that had been decimated by the Turkish army during its war against the PKK and the civil insurgency there. What she did was not only show the destruction of the city, but hang Turkish flags over the buildings. And this was something that was considered extremely offensive to the government, to the Turkish army. It was considered unpatriotic, and from their perspective, sort of equivalent to support of the PKK. That is the Kurdistan Workers' Party that the Turkish state has been waging a war with since 1984. There was a brief sort of period of peace process that I'll talk about a little bit. But once it was reunited, the amount of force that's been used in Kurdish cities, in provinces, the sieges, the civil insurgency and so forth has led to a lot of civilian deaths there. So this was a comment on that. And so you had a lot of activism within Turkey as well, Free Zehra Doğan, which, of course, for an English-speaking audience, for cognitive reasons, looks like freezer Doğan, but that's not what it means. It's Free Zehra Doğan. I teach a course on cognitive biases in foreign policy, so I can't help that. So she is not only an artist, but she's also a journalist. And this is one of the reasons that she came on the Turkish government radar as well. So it's not just this painting that was showing the destruction of what the Turkish army is doing to Kurdish civilians in Kurdish areas, but also the fact that she's worked for news outlets such as Jinha, which is an exclusively Kurdish female news organization. So she'd been on their radar for a while, and in, I think it was February of 2017, she was picked up and put in jail. Interestingly, she wrote of sort of the incredibly horrific experience that she had in jail, jailmates hanging themselves, the torture that she saw and so forth, in a letter to Banksy that she was able to sneak out of jail. So there's been artist-artist sort of communication back and forth. So being a journalist got her on the Turkish government's radar, and that's not surprising if you know anything about Turkey and the situation of journalists there. Turkey is, and it's still surprising to people that don't know this, but to me it's like, well, yeah, this guy is blue sometimes. Turkey is the largest jailer of journalists. It's not China, it's not India, sorry, it's not China, it's not Iran, it is Turkey. There have been over 320 journalists who have been arrested since the coup attempt in July of 2016. There has been an extraordinarily wide brush used to interpret the anti-terrorism law in Turkey. So if you're writing about the Kurdish issue, or if you are believed to have shown any sort of support for the Gülen movement, which is a movement that the Turkish government believes is behind the coup attempt, there's a very, very wide interpretation of what it means to have engaged in terrorist propaganda, such that it's not just the journalists who are in jail, it's also those who have been fired, who can no longer have jobs, who are now in exile, and those who are self-censoring because they're afraid of losing their jobs. There's a number of dynamics here. So you often hear about the fact that Turkey is sort of this large jailer of journalists. An AKP spokesperson actually in December said there are no journalists in jail in Turkey. Not a single one. That's a lie. That's false. And it's actually important to understand why that person said that, because for that individual, if you have engaged in any of these activities, like writing about the Turkish campaign in Afrin, like writing about the violence in the southeast in Turkey, like having previously worked for a particular newspaper, you are a terrorist. And therefore, you de facto are no longer a journalist. So that's the argument that's being made. So we've heard a lot about the journalists. And if you sort of notice me doing this strange thing, it's because the machine to advance the slides is in the next room, which is slightly Byzantine and therefore ironic. There we go. So in addition to, you got that, I like that. In addition to the jailing of journalists, we also have the jailing of academics. In total, over 500,000 people have been detained since the coup attempt in July of 2016. 150,000 have lost their jobs. And it's important to recognize that once you lose a job, particularly from a teaching position, you're not going to get it again at another university or another school. We've had academics who have gone on hunger strike, for example, as you see in the photo. You have lawyers who are defending those who have gone on hunger strike, who are in jail. So if you are protesting, if you write about someone protesting, if you defend someone protesting, you might find yourself in jail, perhaps temporarily, perhaps detained, perhaps harassed, but there's going to be some kind of negative consequence for you. And of course, we also know about the case of those who were involved in the Gezi protests of 2013, which started off as sort of an environmental protest, but spread very quickly nationwide to kind of push back against the AKP. You have Osman Kavala on the left-hand side, an Armenian, Turkish civil society activist, and Yiğit Aksakoglu on the right-hand side, who was actually only very recently detained. Back in November, he is in solitary confinement. You may ask, why are you detaining people now for something that happened in 2013 in authoritarian regimes? This sort of incremental, slight reminder that speaking out against the government is an effective way of deterring people. So you've heard about probably the lawyers and the journalists and the civil society activists and so forth, but I don't know that you've heard about the actors. And I don't know that you've heard about the painters and the singers and so forth. So that's where I want to focus a little bit of this discussion today. So speaking of Gezi Park and this nationwide uprising where you saw protests in 80 out of 81 provinces in Turkey, pushing back against all things from the indiscriminate use of violence of the police during the protests to the media silence, such that media outlets were not covering these protests. Again, the sort of incremental reach of the government. The Gezi protests really brought together a lot of different segments of society, and of course is now by the government being seen as insurrection, kind of equivalent to treason in a sense, which is why you're seeing these individuals who were participating in that in jail. These particular actors, unfortunately, were involved in staging a play before the Gezi Park protests. This is called Mi minor, or E minor, and it's a farcical play about a country in which everything is free unless the dictator doesn't like it, unless the president doesn't like it. You can do absolutely anything you want unless this particular individual deems it unacceptable. And one of the laws is you can't play anything in E minor. So that's where the title of the play comes from. So this had been a group of actors who'd been performing this for a while, actually since December of 2012. And when Gezi Park happened, they showed up on the front page of pro-government newspapers saying, first it was on the stage, now it's in Taksim Square, what was going on? And they were accused of rehearsing Gezi Park protests on stage in terms of trying out tactics, figuring out how to mobilize, get people together, get people to engage in insurrection, and so forth. So there was so much harassment of these individuals that in fact the director, main actor, and playwright are in exile in the UK. They were targeted by the government. Such were the claims that, look, there was a girl in a red dress protesting during Gezi. Has anyone seen this iconic sort of photo of the girl getting, the nice red dress and the pearls and the handbag, and she's getting shot in the face with tear gas? Well, look, there was a girl in the red dress on stage. Clear-cut case, right? So, Gezi is a sensitive point for the government. So you have artists who have been targeted by the government. I wanted to give another example of a play. This is a play called Parayla Satılmaz, or It Will Not Be Sold with Money. Will not be bought with money, will not be sold with money. So can anyone familiar with Turkey guess what this play might be about? Soma, exactly. So in May of 2014, there was a mining disaster in Soma in Turkey, and it killed 301 miners. This was clearly a case of a company that was running this that wasn't following all of the rules, a company that had ties with influential people, a company whereby if there were going to be inspections, they knew about it ahead of time. So this was clearly a case of negligence, and this is not the only case of workers being killed that we've seen in Turkey due to negligence potentially associated with corruption. So this is a play put on in Soma. It was successful in Istanbul and Ankara, but it was banned in Soma because this was deemed as offensive to Turkey and to its memory. The reference of it can't be bought or sold with money is that there are a lot of beliefs that the reason that the people of Soma have not been speaking out very vocally is because the government paid them off. So this was sort of a protest against that. Briefly looking at sculpture, I thought might be interesting. Anyone know this one? Michelle, you might know this one, maybe? No? Anybody? Yeah. Exactly. Perfect, okay. So this is in the province of Kars, right near the Armenian border. This was built in 2011. And this was, I think it's like a commitment to humanity, or the title is something like this. And it was meant to be two statues. They're about 115 feet tall, with the arm of one of them reaching out to Armenia. So it was a demonstration of brotherhood. It was actually commissioned by the local municipalities in Kars. Erdogan, while visiting, then Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, while visiting in 2011, called the statue a monstrosity ucube. He said, this is a monstrosity. It's a freak show. It's a, what's a better way of saying that? It's a freak show, yeah. And so it was destroyed. Piece by piece, it was taken down. One of the sort of funny elements of that, of course, is that when he was, well, not funny, I suppose, but when he was making the statement, he was trying very hard to court nationalist votes in the area, nationalists who were opposed to any kind of reconciliation between Turkey and Armenia. So this may have been a bit of an outreach by calling this a monstrosity. I guess the funnier side is that, in fact, the artist, Mehmet Aksoy, who has Armenian roots himself, was awarded, I think, about $3,800 for libel, for like, you know, smearing his name. And he says, I don't want any dirty money. And he is indicted for 56 months in jail for saying, I don't want any dirty money. Now, he actually didn't get that sentence, but you know, again, the cycle of the political influence in the art, I think, is very interesting to follow. So that statue no longer exists. In terms of singers and of movie directors, I just want to talk about the Kurdish issue a little bit more very quickly. You have Cihan on the left-hand side, who was arrested for using the word Kurdistan in a song. For the Turkish government, the word Kurdistan is separatist. It means that this is not just an area of space where individuals reside, but rather there should be a unity that is specific to Kurds. Some talk about a unity among Kurds in Syria, Iran, Iraq, and Turkey. Others talk just about a separate Turkish area. But the word Kurdistan was considered to be a terrorist act, so she was in jail. And then Kazım Öz, on the right-hand side, directed a film, ironically, given money by the Turkish Ministry of Cultural Affairs when there was a peace process with the Kurds, so that they were promoting movies about the Kurds. But now, because the movie is about the Dersim massacre, which is the murder of Alevi Kurds in 1937 and 38, estimated between 15 to 70,000 Kurds killed there, he was arrested as well. So the timing of your art and political situations can get you into a lot of trouble as well. In terms of other issues that might get you in trouble, I've talked about the Kurdish issue, I've talked about Gezi, celebrating with alcohol and wearing miniskirts and standing next to men if you are a woman is another way that you can get into trouble. So the Tophane district of Istanbul is an area that's going under some gentrification. You have a lot of cultural diversity within the region. You have some galleries that are opening up with art receptions, sometimes with alcohol outside, and a number of these galleries have been attacked. So this photo on the right-hand side is kind of grainy. It was footage from the gallery itself. This was an objection to men and women standing next to each other. There was an attack in 2010 because apparently there was a painting depicting couples kissing. There was actually an attack on a music shop that was hosting a Radiohead event where they were serving alcohol during Ramadan, and so they were beaten up by individuals in the streets. So those kinds of behaviors that one might associate with an art gallery, we have wine behind us. I hope we'll be okay. Those kinds of things can get you into trouble in these particular Turkish neighborhoods. So I just wanted to give you a couple of small glimpses into theater and music and the Kurdish issue and Gezi and so forth. And then I wanted to dive deep into a discussion with one of our local artists now. But I wanted to leave you with a quote that I thought was kind of interesting. This is Arzu Koca, who is an artist. She recently moved to Sarajevo, and she left Turkey stating that she could no longer breathe in Erdogan's Turkey. And she said, the policies that have been enacted, the social changes that have resulted from them, and just the space for me to express what I want to express is no longer there. And so now she's pursuing a degree at the Academy of Art in Sarajevo. And we know that we have a lot of artists like those who had been involved in the play, who were sort of chased out of Turkey. We have others of those who have left sort of more voluntarily. But just this sort of idea that the space for expression is no longer there, I think is something that's worth considering. Now, are there still galleries opening, and are there still individuals engaging in art and daring to do so? Yes. But in an environment where you have the numbers of journalists and lawyers and civil society activists and individuals standing next to each other, men and women, and drinking alcohol on the streets and talking about cultural rights issues, when those spaces are constrained, the art suffers in a sense, but one can also think about that as being a space for contestation, of pushing back. And what we're seeing is some of those individuals still willing to pay the price for doing so. So I just wanted to give that little vignette, and now I would like to invite Sermin Ciddi to join me, and we'll have a discussion of art here in the US. So thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please have a seat. I think it's okay. Is the mic sounding okay? Everything? All right.
Can you hear me?
So I have to, full disclosure, Sermin Ciddi is a very, very dear friend of mine. I was visiting her in her Istanbul home beginning in 2012 and her art studio and seeing the beautiful, beautiful work that she was doing. I'm thrilled that she has moved to the United States, that she now has a studio in the Torpedo Factory in Alexandria. I know Michelle mentioned that, but if you guys haven't been to the Torpedo Factory, just on King Street by the waterfront, I highly recommend it. She's on the 3rd floor. It's gorgeous stuff. You have a couple of examples here, and then some prints in the back to look at. But you have in your presence one of Turkey's most well-renowned Ottoman miniature artists. Ottoman miniature is one of the great Islamic fine arts, along with Hintz, which is calligraphy, ebru, marbling painting. So since we have the expert, I thought I would ask you, can you tell us exactly sort of what Ottoman miniature is? I mean, it doesn't mean, you know, painting things on the head of a pin. It's this very long tradition, this very well-established tradition of art. Can you just kind of describe for us what Ottoman miniature is?
Okay. And miniature paintings and book arts, actually, and the Ottoman Empire, small paintings, and used to create illuminated books and albums for the sultans. And during the Mehmet II, and the academy has founded in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, and to become, you know, and an artist to create and sultan's portrait and weddings, historical events, and sometimes, you know, the life of rulers. And beginning of the 16th century, Persian Academy was founded again in the Topkapi Palace for imported Persian artists. Second part of the 16th century was the golden age for the miniature paintings, and lots of artists and showed up. One of them I admire most was Matrakçı. And still, you know, today, if you bring and then bigger their artwork, and it seems like a modern an art. And I would say, you know, because the book arts, but the, you know, miniature painting is coming out now on the wall, or sometimes the tiles.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's a form of artistic expression, but it's also a form of documentation.
Yeah.
In knowing what was going on in the palace, what sultans were doing, what they were engaging in.
Yes, it's a documentary. Yes, as you said, you know, sometimes always the miniature tells the, you know, true story, and then not the, you know, the some kind of, you know, imaginative things, and weddings and historical events, and you know, some kind of documentary lives. We can understand all the clothing, for example, what they wear,
yeah,
and then what they live or how they lived. Yes, it's very documentary.
So this is one of the things that fascinates me, because in my book, I'm sort of looking at, you know, how regimes use pop culture, how the opposition uses it, but also how we as scholars can look at things like novels and even television shows and films, not as, you know, true documentaries, but rather kind of interpretive takes on events and so forth. So to know that Ottoman paintings are used by historians to learn about, what the palace life and the clothes and the travels and so forth. And your paintings have been used in a documentary about Evliya Çelebi, right? The famous traveler?
Yeah, and I used to study traditional way because I wanted always the contemporary, but they told me I, used to know and used to learn and all the pattern, and I'm going to use later on. For example, Evliya Çelebi, and then, we have to use the 17th century and then clothing and then pattern on the clothes or anything else I've used.
So of all these arts, and we're now seeing this transition into more local themes and sort of nature themes and so forth, but we also have a couple of examples of, the tiles that you talked about. Why did you choose Ottoman miniature as your form of expression?
As I said, I studied traditional illumination arts and traditional miniature paintings, but now I do contemporary, and I do different ways. One of them is, and then, architectural work, and the other one is a documentary or just like a Kubat Abad tiles.
Which is the middle one, the big blue middle one there, where you can see it's birds, it's geometry. All of these tiles were lost, I believe, when the palace was
it's because beyond this artwork meaning is if you protect your valuable things, time takes away from you. Some of them stolen, some of them broken, some of them taken to the museum or such a thing. And why miniature? I've been doing, contemporary because I can express myself and doing miniature paintings. Miniature paintings allows you and to tell all the story in one page because there is no perspective and then only the two dimension. And, I can express myself and, using to, different ideas. Sometimes, I can open different pages, 2 or 3 pages in a one page. I can tell the stories, and it's my way.
So it's a way of capturing even, temporal variation. You can take scenes from history and kind of put them all on the same canvas.
Yes, definitely, yes.
Okay. So in my work and in my study of pop culture, I've been fascinated writing about the rise of what I call Ottoman Islamism in Turkey, sort of this version of what the ruling party considers to be the right version of Turkishness. Not that to be a good Turk you are secular or you consider yourself modern and westernizing and so forth, but rather that being a good Turk is being a pious Sunni Muslim, respecting a patriarchy, an authority, a leader of high authority, and kind of seeing Turkey's role as grounded in the former Ottoman lands and defender of the Palestinians and reaching out to the Balkans and kind of taking advantage of that Ottoman history. So we've seen like Ottomania, what some people have referred to it as. I think that was Elif Batuman. I can't take the credit for that. But in everything from like real estate ads to chewing gum, everyone's a sultan, right? So with this rise of interest in all things Ottoman, does that mean there's a rise in, and honestly some pretty garish costumes, is there a rise in the real Ottoman arts as well? Have you seen that there's an interest, like a resurgent interest in Ottoman miniature?
And what exactly you mean?
So, like, I'm seeing, soap operas. If anyone's seen The Magnificent Century, Muhteşem Yüzyıl, there's all this fascination with what palace life was like. Do you see that, say, the AKP or just in general, there's more interest in Ottoman life or Ottoman art?
Not only the arts and then the life, but, I saw just a few episodes of the Muhteşem Yüzyıl. Because I
think we watched one together.
I didn't want to, the watch later on because it's not the reality, only the harem life. For example, Matrakçı Nasu is a miniaturist, historian, mathematician, and a very good quality man. And then he's a star of, the 16th century as an artist and a historian. But and you can't see, and then this, I'm telling all the, kind of, and, and you can't see just, you can see just simple man over there. did you understand? I don't know how many of you watch, and can you understand? He's an historian. He's a miniaturist.
He comes across kind of average.
I mean, only the harem life and the love life, and then there is no power. The sultans and going to the war or doing some. I mean, it's rubbish to me. It's
I think
rubbish
that's a very fair take.
Yeah.
And it's funny actually. After they kind of toned down the palace intrigue and the cleavage and all that kind of stuff, the show went off the air. So I think people lost interest in it. So now you're in DC, and your home is Istanbul, and you were born and raised in Istanbul, and a beautiful part on the Asian side. If anyone has ever been to Çengelköy or the Kadıköy area, really, really beautiful. So you've been here 2 years almost now. Is creating art any different in the U.S. than it is in Turkey? Do you think differently? Does your process work differently? Do you notice any difference?
I mean, art means creation. You have to be free, and whatever you like, painting or sculpture, and then sometimes you can protest, and sometimes you can do whatever you like, new paintings or sculptures or everything. I mean, this is a creation. You have to be free, and then you can say, oh, if I do this, is it acceptable or not acceptable, and it's not the artist's soul. And I feel more creative in here because people show a lot of great deal of interest to my creation. Even my style is not very familiar to their taste, but my color and then my style, and then it's very, very interesting for them. And then as you said, the very short time, nearly 2 years, I made a lot of customers.
And hopefully more. No, I've been in her studio a number of times, and it's always fascinating because people are drawn in by the color. They're drawn in by the blues of the Bosphorus, right? But then I think there's the detail of the architecture, which is, you guys, if you came in, there's this huge painting of Alexandria. It's Old Town Alexandria, where to do the geography right, she goes and takes a picture of every building. So it's documentary. There is a restaurant that was on there that's closed, but it's on there. It's a record of it. So it's the colors and it's the shapes, but there are these themes too that you incorporate in your art that I hadn't seen when you were working in Turkey, like the good versus evil and the dragon versus the phoenix.
Yes, as I said, I'm working 3 ways. Sometimes I do architectural work, and sometimes I do nature, and sometimes I do symbolic arts to give some messages to mankind. And I'm using dragon and phoenix because they are well known and the symbols around the universe. And the people especially, and even the children, they know, the phoenix, it burns itself to reborn from its ashes. And then they show the interest. And then, I sold nearly all of them. I need to work very hard because, and yes, the team is changed. And, just like in Istanbul, I do paintings, the places which I live or visiting them. And last summer, I went to Montana, the Glacier Park, and then I was so impressed. I thought I died, and then I was in a heaven. And it was very good. And then I made 2 artwork about Montana Glacier Park, and one of them very near to us, Great Falls.
Waterfalls.
And yes, and architectural work is Alexandria is my first architectural work. I'm going to continue because people love my, the Alexandria, because as I said, art is and very creative, must be and unique, never done before.
Yeah.
And then that's why, arts and artists can do.
And it was amazing to watch her working on that too, and sketching it out and then bringing it to life. And people would come in the studio, oh, what's it going to be like next week?
Another thing is, just like all the people visiting me, they talk to each other. They tell me the same thing. They find it very unique, very colorful, very vivid. It's good to hear.
So I want to open it up for questions, but I just want to ask one more question. I ended with that quote from Arzu, the artist in Sarajevo, and she said, "I couldn't breathe in Erdogan's Turkey." Does that resonate with you at all? Do you understand that sentiment? Did it feel different?
I think it's very similar what I feel, and it's somehow you feel the differences, and I think everybody has some kind of pressure, and some way an artist can do, and because as I said, I want to feel free what I do. I don't want to get, oh, it's not nice. For example, some galleries they don't accept. Not happen to me, but happen to my friend. If they work new, they didn't accept by the galleries. Or
so some of your friends' artworks weren't accepted by galleries because of who they were, or
no. The artwork is they work new, and then they didn't accept.
Nude.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No clothes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then no clothes.
Okay.
I mean, they didn't accept. I don't know why, because you can't ask them, why do you accept it,
Right.
or something. Some of the sculpture taken, for example, some places from they were, and because they were not very traditional, and it's not right.
Okay. So you saw some things getting accepted and some things turned away.
And another thing is you are going to receptions or galleries because your friends and opening, the exhibitions, or sometimes I do whatever. And then so many galleries attacked by the people because in the first day, and then they offer you, alcohol or, just a soft drinks. And, anybody feel free, having alcohol or soft drinks or water, whatever they like, whatever they wear. I mean, some kind of things you feel you are under pressure.
Okay. Fascinating. All right. So we have this incredible artist here. If you have any questions about the specific politics, maybe I can help out with that. But can I take some questions for Sermin Ciddi? Yes, please.
It's a good question, thank you. But there is some different reason. For example, economic reasons. And if you then do or spend so many times on your art or quality or something, you are expecting to get money. What about this the time you spend, but you can't find any customers to buy or something, and that's why you are doing something not very good, but you can sell easily, and some kind of reasons, for example. And then the other thing is, and you have to be very qualified artist, not only in Turkey. Sometimes, and the galleries or, they offer you, this is the good artist or this is the best or something. But to me, if you want to be great or well-known artist, not only in Turkey, you have to well-known and another world, Europe, or United States. And they have to accept you as an artist or, sort of things. But as I said, and then if you can't get the money and then you are doing something different, or you are sometimes, two jobs maybe, because the artist usually can't get enough money to live.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important point to bring up is the economics of this.
Yeah.
And having time to be able to do what you want to do and not have to mass produce something.
Yeah.
There's also the case in film and in other media that the state will support, or in the past would support filmmakers, would support artists and things like that.
We can see
it's now kind of tailored to particular sections of the population.
Yes, and if they don't support from the government, for example, not only the the paintings and art, for example, theaters.
Yeah.
And then they are going to closing down, because
so it's not in any way to glorify the state under Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, but there was a lot of investment in state theater and state ballet and state opera as seen as sort of the high European culture to which they wanted Turks to aspire. And I think that was something that really produced a lot of local interest and then local talent, maybe not imitating the West, but using that. But when you don't have that state support anymore, it gets very tough.
Yeah.
Other questions, please?
Mm-hmm.
Just to amplify that, because we didn't have a mic, were you working on nature while in Istanbul as well? Because clearly there's a nature theme here. And then also, have you collaborated with the Torpedo Factory Artist?
Yeah, and then I can give you my card, and then you can see all my artwork in the website, because Istanbul was my life. I was born in and then brought up there, and then I was impressed. And every day, just like I seen the Bosphorus, and every day, just the first time, and then the colors and the skies, and then seagulls, and then the currents, and everywhere I remember. And I used to do a lot of nature and the documentary as well as for the TVs. And Torpedo Factory has, and in a month there are so many things happening, but I am not able to join all of them. And some of them, because I used to go to Smithsonian very often and to see, but now I am not, I don't have too much time even going out and joining every event. But I do sometimes if I find it, because as you see, my artwork is full of detail. Takes a lot of time to do that. I'm very busy.
Yeah, please. Oh, I think we have a microphone coming. Michelle to the rescue.
I was just wondering, are there any insurgency messages in your art now that you're not in Turkey but you're here? Is there anything that you're doing, expressing in your art that would reflect your disposition towards the regime?
I'm not a political person. I am not, and I do architectural and symbolic art. And symbolic art, I like to give very important messages to all mankind, because I am concerned about the nature, and it's very important to live better future for the next generations. And every morning, and then we can be more wiser, just like a phoenix did. And then we can think what we've done yesterday or just the last month or the last year. We don't have to make the same mistakes we done before. And it means an answer to or all the questions maybe.
I do the part of being the insurgent person. That's why I don't get to go back to Turkey anymore.
Yeah.
For now, for now. Other questions? Yes? Please.
Yeah.
To what extent do you feel like the international community of Turkish artists not living in Turkey are connected to one another and can collaborate with one another to share their art?
Just repeat it. Say it again with the mic. What the heck? We got the resource.
Just asking to what extent you feel like the international community of Turkish artists are collaborative with one another, or are they sort of more separate and working together in local communities?
And recently, and they are doing the mixed exhibition outside the Turkey. And because they are searching some way to go and outside of the Turkey. And sometimes if they find a way, they go just himself or herself, but usually they go and then together. The mixed exhibitions, maybe it's much more easier or much more economic, but they are trying to find a way to go out.
So then just maybe a follow-up, do you still feel connected to artists who are still living in Turkey? And do you think international artists can stay connected to their other artists who are still living in Turkey, or is that sort of difficult to manage?
I don't know, and maybe it's difficult.
It's interesting because there's, you see this in a lot of, I don't know if I would necessarily define the diaspora community is a really broad term. It depends a lot on your motivation of being part of that community. But often there are kind of the same struggles or divides or issues that we see in Turkey, we sometimes see in the communities outside of Turkey as well. And I think that, and I wonder maybe if there are issues within the artist community, if there are political reasons that people don't want to collaborate, or does the spirit of art bring us together? I don't know. That's a really tough
Yeah,
question.
it's very difficult
Yeah.
because everybody and they don't trust each other.
Yeah.
That is the problem. I mean, maybe you're a friend, but I don't know what happened if they change. I mean, everybody is just,
It's I don't know if this is extrapolating too far, but I think there are often consequences of regimes in which fear and intimidation and mistrust is a way of quelling the expression of dissent, and that maybe individuals have been targeted, they've been put in jail, perhaps the charges against them are false, but if you are seen associating with that person, then that might rub off on you, and so you're not sure about if you should be associating with that person. So it's a very kind of pernicious, it's a dangerous climate to be working in.
yes, they are turning just itself and then just out of the society. And it's very difficult. Not trusting the people, even your friend or your soulmate, or sometimes telling something is difficult to have to leave because it's so strange maybe what I am telling you, but I'm coming, this community. And, sometimes you have to leave.
Well, we are very, very, very glad to have you, and I'm sure that you miss Istanbul, and Istanbul has changed a whole lot in recent history.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Because I miss my childhood Istanbul, old Istanbul. I was brought up because so many ways it was different and cultural, or the people. We used to respect each other, and the people, so many different people, such a good mosaic. And now it's I don't miss Istanbul, because the Istanbul is not the same I used to love. Istanbul is a great city, and East and West meet together. It's a wonderful city, but something is happening. And, you know, it's my dream, old Istanbul.
Well, I think we're lucky that partially because of your art, we have documentaries of Istanbul.
Yeah.
And perhaps maybe to get a little bit to the first question, we'll see a new Istanbul rise again from the ashes of
Yes,
the
I hope
concrete
so.
that's being poured over it at the
I
moment.
hope so. And then the other thing is, every time it happened the same in the past. I think art will save the world, and then we'll save each other, or respect to each other, love each other, because. And when I notice the people, they are coming to my studio, we don't know each other, but somehow we are connected. They are different culture, different people. They are coming from all over the world, or the other states, or so. I'm new, but somehow we are connected. I can understand we are touching on each other's hearts. We are talking some different way.
Well, I think art may save the world is about the best note to end on, and I've never ended an event on a positive note, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Hintz, having me. Thank you.